Hey church, it's Harry here again for today's Take 5, and today we're looking at a section in Ephesians 5 where Paul is talking all about like how Christian households should live, and kind of how the outworkings of that work. And he's talking a lot about power, and he's talking a lot about love and responsibility and stuff like that, but he kind of is shifting this model into kind of, instead of talking about power, how we use it to dominate, he's talking about actually how we use power in every relationship to use it to become an opportunity to reflect Christ's character. And the way he's talking about it is through talking about husbands and wives, as parents, children's. He was talking about slaves, and their masters, and actually that all of them are called to use whatever power, whatever authority they have, not just for their own personal gain to move them up the ranks or their own self-interest, but for the good of others. Now, I'm away at a retreat at the moment with a load of young people, and amazingly, we've got this chessboard down here, and I thought, isn't this just such a striking analogy? The way that we've got the king here, he may be like the most important piece in a game of chess, but he's limited, isn't he? He's limited in what he can do, and he's also super vulnerable. The objective is everybody's trying to get that king. The queen herself, she carries great range, doesn't she? Has big influence over the board, makes people a bit nervous when you start moving that around, and has such a big movement. But neither of those on their own, the king or the queen, are able to fulfill the purpose of the full purpose of the game, right? Each piece, as we spoke about yesterday, in the body, each piece has different responsibilities, different gifts, and they all depend on one another for protection, for the strategy of the game itself, but ultimately about victory, right? Victory. And that's what Paul is really talking about here, as he's talking about power. Actually, power on this board, this chessboard, it's not about one piece providing just being the provision of superior to another piece. It's about being coordinated and sacrificial, in the way that they're looking after each other to get to the shared purpose of victory. And that's exactly what Paul was talking about, I feel. Leadership here, when you're playing a game of chess, without love, or even in life as well, leadership without love, without being sacrificial, is just like a king just exposed without any support from the other parts of the game, right? Strength without humility becomes reckless, doesn't it? When we start using our power for the wrong things, it's reckless. It's just like the queen just charging around on the board here. It's just, that's actually how I play sometimes, and I always lose. But that just shows you, doesn't it? It's not about being reckless. You've got to, in God's design, you've got to use your power to serve, to work together in the role that God's given you, or the gifts that God's given you, so that the whole kingdom can stand, right? And I just love that, because everything points to the King of Kings, doesn't it? We've got this king here, but ultimately this passage is pointing to us representing how to use power through the King of Kings, and that is Jesus. And so I guess my thought for us today is that actually, how can we use whatever sphere of influence we've got, whatever power we've been given, whether it's in our homes, whether it's in our jobs, whether it's in our relationships with other people, how can we use that to help people grow, rather than using that as something to use it to kind of dominate somebody else, or to try and take somebody else out? How are we using it to build others up, and to really show what gifts they have, so that we can use it together to build his kingdom? So I just thought I'd leave with that today. So take care, guys, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.